You know, people always want to hear the happy stories, the success stories, how Spider-Man became the biggest superhero in the world, how he saved Marvel, how he changed everything. And yeah, all of that's true. But nobody ever asks about the part where I almost lost everything because of him. Nobody asks about the day Martin Goodman, my publisher, my boss, the guy who signed my paychecks, told me I was finished if I published that Spider Kid. So let me tell you that story, the real story, the one that still gives me chills when I think about it. Because they fired me over Spider-Man isn't just a catchy phrase. It's what actually happened. And looking back now, 6 decades later, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, to Marvel, and to millions of kids who needed a hero they could actually relate to. But man, it sure didn't feel that way in 1962. Let me set the scene for you. It's early 1962, and I'm sitting in this cramped little office at 625 Madison Avenue in New York. I've been writing comics for 20 years at this point. 20 years! I started when I was just a teenager, and now I'm pushing 40, and I'm asking myself, is this it? Is this all I'm ever going to be? A guy who writes silly stories about monsters and cowboys and romance? Marvel, or Timely Comics, or Atlas Comics, whatever we were calling ourselves that week, because we kept changing names like we were in witness protection. We were barely hanging on. Our distribution deal had collapsed. We were down to publishing only 8 titles a month. 8. DC Comics was crushing us with Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman. They had the Justice League. They had everything. And what did we have? Nothing. We were the bargain basement of comics. The also ran. The publisher nobody took seriously. I remember Joan, my wife. God rest her soul. She'd see me come home every night looking defeated. I'd sit at the dinner table pushing food around my plate, and she'd say, "Stan, why don't you just quit? You could write novels. You could write for television. You're talented enough." And she was right. I could have left, probably should have left. But there was this stubborn part of me, this foolish, stubborn part, that believed comics could be more than they were, that they could mean something, that they could matter. Then Martin Goodman came back from a golf game with Jack Leibowitz, the publisher of DC Comics, and Martin, he comes into my office all excited, waving his arms around, and he says, Stan, Jack just told me their Justice League book is selling like hotcakes. We need to do a superhero team right away." Now, this wasn't the first time Martin had gotten excited about copying whatever DC was doing. We'd been chasing their coattails for years, but something about this conversation, I don't know, something clicked for me. I went home that night and I complained to Joan. I said, "Martin wants another superhero team, another generic, interchangeable, boring superhero team. I can't do it anymore. I can't write another story where the heroes are perfect and the villains are evil and everything is simple and nothing feels real." And Joan was always smarter than me. She looked at me over her book and said something that changed everything. She said, "Stan, if you're going to quit anyway, why don't you create the kind of heroes you want to create? What do you have to lose?" What did I have to lose? Everything, as it turned out, but also nothing, because she was right. If I was going to walk away, I might as well go out swinging. So I created the Fantastic Four. Not perfect heroes, heroes with problems. Reed Richards was brilliant but distant. Sue Storm was powerful but insecure. Johnny Storm was hot-headed, literally, and immature. And Ben Grimm, poor Ben, he was transformed into a monster, and he hated what he'd become. They fought with each other. They had money problems. They had relationship drama. They were real, and readers loved it. Suddenly we had a hit. Not a massive hit, not yet, but enough of a hit that Martin was willing to let me try more. So I created the Hulk, then Thor, then Ant-Man, each one flawed in their own way, each one human, even when they were gods or monsters. But I wanted to push further. I wanted to create something that really broke the mold, something that challenged every assumption about what a superhero could be. I wanted to create a teenager, not a teenage sidekick. We'd had those forever. Robin, Bucky, Kid Flash, all the junior partners who stood behind the real heroes and said clever quips and got rescued when things got tough. No, I wanted a teenager who was the hero, the main character, the guy on the cover. And more than that, I wanted him to have real teenage problems. Not which color cape should I wear today problems. Real problems, money problems, girl problems, school problems, bully problems. The kind of problems that every kid reading my comics was dealing with every single day. I started thinking, what if we had a kid who got superpowers, and instead of his life getting easier, it got harder? What if the powers were actually a burden? What if being a hero meant sacrifice? That's when the spider came in. I've told this story 1,000,000 times, but I'll tell it again because it's true. I was sitting in my office watching a fly crawl up the wall, and I thought, what if a person could do that? What if someone could stick to walls, climb buildings, swing from place to place? I started going through animals. Insect man. No, that sounds terrible. Mosquito man, even worse. Fly man, absolutely not. Then I thought, Spider-Man, and it clicked. Spiders were creepy. People were afraid of them, but they were also incredible. They could do things that seemed impossible. They were small but powerful, fragile but dangerous, perfect. So I had my concept, a teenage superhero with spider powers. Peter Parker, a nerdy, awkward, unpopular high school kid who gets bitten by a radioactive spider and gains incredible abilities. But here's the key, the thing that made him different. Peter doesn't become confident and cool when he gets his powers. He's still awkward, still insecure, still dealing with all the same problems, but now he's got this massive responsibility on top of everything else. I was so excited. I ran down the hall to Martin Goodman's office with my notes, and I pitched him the idea, and Martin looked at me like I'd just suggested we publish a comic about a talking potato. Stan, he said, leaning back in his chair, that's the worst idea I've ever heard. I said, Martin, just hear me out. No, he interrupted. First of all, teenagers can't be superheroes. They're sidekicks. That's how it works. Readers want strong adult heroes, not kids. But Martin, second, he continued, spiders. Stan, people hate spiders. They're disgusting. Nobody wants to read about a spider. That's exactly why. And third, he said, standing up now, really getting worked up, you want to call him Spider-Man? What kind of name is that? It sounds like an insect. It sounds weak. I tried to argue. I explained my reasoning. I told him about making heroes relatable, about giving kids someone they could see themselves in, about breaking the mold. He wasn't having it. Stan, he said, and his voice got very quiet, very serious. If you publish this Spider-Man character, if you waste one of our precious monthly slots on this ridiculous idea, you're done. I'll fire you. I'm not joking. 20 years we've worked together, but I will let you go. Do you understand me? I understood. I understood perfectly. I walked back to my office, and I sat down at my desk, and I stared at my notes about Peter Parker and his radioactive spider bite, and his dead Uncle Ben, and his struggle to do the right thing when doing the right thing cost him everything. And I had a choice to make. I could play it safe. I could shelve Spider-Man. I could create another generic superhero that Martin would approve of, something safe, something conventional, something that wouldn't rock the boat. I could keep my job, keep my steady paycheck, keep my comfortable position in an industry I'd been part of for 2 decades, or I could take the biggest risk of my career. I could do what Joan said, create the kind of hero I wanted to create. I could trust my instincts. I could believe that somewhere out there were readers who wanted something different, something real, something honest. I could lose everything, or I could change everything. You know what I chose, but here's the thing. I couldn't just outright defy Martin. He was my boss. He controlled the company. If I put Spider-Man in one of our regular monthly titles, he'd see it, he'd kill it, and he'd kill my career along with it. So I got sneaky. We had this comic called Amazing Fantasy. It was an anthology series, different stories every month, nothing connected, and it was dying. Issue number 15 was going to be the last one. It was already canceled, dead, finished. I thought, what does Martin care about a canceled book? It's already dead. Issue number 15 is just fulfilling the contract. Nobody's paying attention to it. So I called up Steve Ditko. Now, Steve was, and I say this with the utmost respect, a strange, brilliant, difficult man. We didn't always see eye to eye. He had his vision, I had mine. But when it came to Spider-Man, something magical happened. Steve understood what I was trying to do. He got it. I gave him the basics. Teenage kid, spider powers, real problems, lives with his aunt and uncle. And Steve, he took that and he added this incredible visual dimension. He designed the costume, that iconic red and blue suit with the webbing, the big expressive eyes on the mask. He made Peter Parker look genuinely nerdy, genuinely unpopular. He made the action dynamic in a way we'd never seen before. And together, working in secret, basically committing career suicide, we created the origin story. Peter Parker gets bitten by a radioactive spider at a science exhibition. He gains amazing powers. He's thrilled. He makes a costume. He goes on a TV show. He starts making money. He's on top of the world. And then, and this is the crucial part, a burglar runs past him. A security guard yells for Peter to stop the guy. And Peter, cocky, selfish, thinking only about himself, lets the burglar go. Not my problem, he says. Days later, Peter comes home to find police cars outside his house. His Uncle Ben, the man who raised him, who loved him, who taught him about responsibility, has been murdered. By who? The same burglar Peter let escape. If Peter had acted, if he had stopped that criminal when he had the chance, Uncle Ben would still be alive. That guilt, that crushing, devastating guilt, that became the foundation of Spider-Man's character. That's when Peter learned the lesson that would define his entire life. With great power comes great responsibility. Steve and I, we poured everything into that story. Every ounce of craft we'd developed over decades of making comics. We made it as good as we possibly could, because we knew it was probably going to be our last hurrah. Our swan song. We snuck it into Amazing Fantasy number 15. The cover date was August 1962. We put Spider-Man on the cover, this dynamic image of him swinging through the city with the tagline, "Though the world may mock Peter Parker, the timid teenager, it will soon marvel at the awesome might of Spider-Man." And then we waited. I didn't tell Martin what I'd done. I figured he wouldn't notice. He had 8 monthly titles to worry about, and Amazing Fantasy was already canceled. Why would he pay attention to the last issue of a dead book? But he did notice. Oh boy, did he notice. I remember the day the issue came out. I was at my desk trying to look busy, trying to act like everything was normal, and I heard Martin's voice booming down the hallway. "Stan! Get in here! Now!" My stomach dropped. I knew what was coming. I stood up, straightened my tie, and walked to his office like a man walking to the gallows. Martin was standing behind his desk, holding a copy of Amazing Fantasy Top 15. His face was red. Veins were popping out on his forehead. He was angrier than I'd ever seen him. "What," he said slowly, carefully, like he was trying not to explode. "Is this," I said, "it's Amazing Fantasy No. 15, the last issue." "I can see that, Stan. What I'm asking is why there's a giant spider on the cover. Why there's a story inside about Spider-Man, the character I specifically, explicitly told you not to create." I took a deep breath. "Martin, it was a dying book. I figured." "You figured wrong," he snapped. "I told you what would happen if you published this. I told you you'd be fired. Did you think I was joking?" "No, sir." "Then why did you do it?" And here's where I could have lied. I could have made excuses. I could have groveled. But I was so tired of playing it safe, so tired of compromising, so I told him the truth. Because I believed in it, Martin. I believed this character could be something special. I believed kids would connect with him in a way they've never connected with a superhero before. And if I was going to go down, I wanted to go down swinging. I wanted to create something I was proud of. Martin stared at me for a long moment. Then he said, "You're done, Stan. Clean out your desk." I nodded. "I understand." I turned to leave. My career was over. 20 years in the comic book industry finished. I'd have to find something else to do with my life. Maybe Joan was right. Maybe I'd write novels. Maybe I'd try television. Maybe I'd do something completely different. But at least I'd gone out on my terms. At least I'd created something I believed in. I made it about halfway down the hall when Martin's secretary came running after me. "Stan, wait! Mr. Goodman wants to see you again." I walked back into his office, expecting maybe one more round of yelling. Martin was sitting at his desk, and he looked different, less angry, more confused. "Stan," he said, "sit down." I sat. "The distributor just called," he said slowly, "about Amazing Fantasy, No. 15. The retailers are calling it in. They're reordering. They can't keep it on the stands. It's selling out everywhere." I didn't say anything. I didn't trust myself to speak. Martin continued, "They're saying it's one of the best-selling comics we've published in years. Kids are going crazy for it. They love this Spider-Man character." He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in Martin Goodman's eyes. Respect. "Maybe," he said quietly. "I was wrong." 3 months later, we launched The Amazing Spider-Man as its own series. Issue number 1 came out in March 1963. It sold even better than Amazing Fantasy number 15. Within a year, Spider-Man was our top-selling character. Within 2 years, he was outselling Superman. Today, 60-plus years later, he's one of the most recognizable fictional characters in the entire world. And I almost didn't create him. I almost played it safe. I almost let Martin Goodman's fear and conventional thinking stop me from taking the risk. But here's what I learned, what I really learned from that experience. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is someone telling you no. Sometimes you need that resistance. Sometimes you need someone to doubt you, to threaten you, to put everything on the line. Because that's when you find out what you really believe in. That's when you discover what you're willing to fight for. If Martin had said yes immediately, if he'd been enthusiastic about Spider-Man from the start, I might not have pushed as hard. Steve and I might not have poured our hearts into that story the way we did. We might not have made it as good as it needed to be. But because we were creating it in defiance, because we were risking everything, we gave it everything. And Spider-Man became what he is today because of that. He became the underdog hero who never gives up, the kid who gets knocked down and gets back up, the character who proves that you don't have to be perfect or powerful or privileged to be a hero. You just have to try. You just have to care. You just have to take responsibility for the power you have, whatever that power might be. Peter Parker was me. He was Steve Ditko. He was every kid who felt like they didn't fit in, who felt like the world was against them, who felt like they'd never be good enough. And the message we gave them, the message that almost got me fired, was this: you are good enough. Your struggles matter. Your story matters. You can be the hero. That's why they tried to fire me over Spider-Man, because I dared to say that heroes could be flawed, could be young, could be vulnerable. I dared to challenge the status quo. I dared to risk everything for what I believed in. And you know what? It was the best thing that ever happened to me, because standing up for Spider-Man taught me something that guided the rest of my career. Trust your instincts. Believe in your vision. Don't let anyone, not your boss, not the market, not the conventional wisdom, tell you what's possible. After Spider-Man, I never hesitated again. When I wanted to create the X-Men as a metaphor for civil rights and prejudice, I did it. When I wanted to make Iron Man a flawed, arrogant billionaire, I did it. When I wanted to explore addiction with Tony Stark, when I wanted to question authority with Captain America, when I wanted to tackle racism with Black Panther, I did it all, because Spider-Man taught me that the risks are worth taking, that the best ideas often sound crazy at first, that sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything to gain something truly special. I think about all the young creators out there right now, writers, artists, filmmakers, entrepreneurs, who have an idea that everyone is telling them won't work, an idea that's too different, too risky, too unconventional, and they're scared. They're thinking about playing it safe, about doing what's expected, about following the formula, and I want to tell them, don't, please don't, take the risk. Trust your vision. Be willing to get fired for what you believe in, because the things that change the world, the things that really matter, they always start with someone being brave enough to hear no and do it anyway. Spider-Man wasn't just a character. He was proof that you could break the rules and win, that you could challenge the establishment and create something meaningful, that you could lose everything and gain everything at the same time. Martin Goodman fired me over Spider-Man. Technically, for about 6 hours, I was unemployed. And then the sales numbers came in, and suddenly I wasn't fired anymore. Suddenly I was the guy with the golden touch. Suddenly everyone wanted to know what my next idea was. But here's the secret. My next idea was no different than Spider-Man. It was just another crazy concept that people said wouldn't work. And the one after that, and the one after that. Because once you prove that the impossible is possible, you can keep doing it. You can keep pushing boundaries. You can keep taking risks. That's the legacy of Spider-Man. Not just that he's a great character, though he is. Not just that he's popular, though he is. But that he proved you could challenge everything people thought they knew about superheroes, about comics, about storytelling, and succeed beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Every time someone creates something new and hears, "That'll never work," Spider-Man is proof that maybe it will. Every time someone is told to play it safe, Spider-Man is proof that safe is often the riskiest choice of all. I'm 90-something years old now. I stopped counting somewhere along the way. And I've had an incredible life. I've created dozens of characters. I've seen my creations on the big screen, bringing in billions of dollars. I've met presidents and kings and millions of fans around the world. But if you ask me what I'm most proud of, it's not the success. It's not the money or the fame or the accolades. It's that day in 1962 when I had to choose between my job and my vision, and I chose the vision. It's that moment when Martin Goodman threatened to fire me, and I went ahead and published Spider-Man anyway, because that's the moment I became more than just a guy who wrote comics. That's the moment I became someone who stood for something, someone who believed in something enough to risk everything for it. And Spider-Man, this kid from Queens, who was too young, too weak, too nerdy to be a hero, he became the symbol of that belief. He became proof that underdogs can win, that misfits can be magnificent, that taking the biggest risk can lead to the greatest reward. They fired me over Spider-Man, or tried to anyway. Best thing that ever happened to me, to Marvel, to millions of kids who found a hero who understood them. And the lesson is simple. When everyone tells you no, when they threaten to take away everything you've worked for, when they say your idea will never work, that's exactly when you need to do it. That's when you need to take the leap. That's when you need to swing into action, even if you're scared, even if you might fall, because sometimes, just sometimes, you'll fly. And that's your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man origin story, not just Peter Parker's, but mine too, Excelsior.